There you go. So our next lesson is about understanding web applications, site collections and sites. So as usual we start with the central administration and we go to the manage web applications. So what do you need to create web applications? Web applications is really where you start. Right? So you create a web application, that's the main container under which you create your SharePoint content. So I'm going to click on new web application. Now normally in an ASP.NET scenario we go to IIS and create a website, but in SharePoint central administration does it for us. So in the central administration when we create a new web application, it then internally creates an IIS website. Right. So when we click on new web application, we've got a couple of options here. We've got authentication, we've got IIS website, we've got the security configuration, we've got the public URL, and then the application pool and the database configuration, and failover, search server, and service application connections. So I know there's too much to actually talk about, but we'll just start one by one. The first thing is authentication. Authentication, we've got classic, we've got claims. Classic really is about having your application integrated with Active Directory authentication, so it's called classic. Claims is about having your user database coming in from external stores. It could include forms-based authentication, or maybe any other store like business connectivity store, or maybe even a live ID, for example. So that's really where you use claims-based authentication. So claims-based authentication is also used in a scenario where the SharePoint is really used as an internet site, because on an internet site you obviously don't have AD users, you have external users. This point of time I'm going to go ahead with classic mode authentication and see how it goes. The first thing is create IIS website. Now the good thing is to actually have a meaningful name. So for example, I'm just calling it as training, 888 for example. So I'll have the same port number. So this application is going to run on 888 port number. Authentication provider, again NTLM and Kerberos. NTLM works for any scenario. So if you have machines in your network which are not part of the domain, then go ahead with NTLM, because they're not going to work if you're going to have Kerberos. So in a scenario where you have a domain where all the machines are absolutely part of the network, the domain, then you go ahead with Kerberos. It also requires some special configuration in the domain itself. Anonymous access allows users who do not have a user ID also to access SharePoint. This is something which is very useful when you have forms or certain content where you need people can access it without having a user ID. SSL allows you to have HTTPS protocol on your web application. When we come down, of course, application pool is very important. Application pool isolates your web applications objects inside the same application. Managed account is important because this application pool runs under this identity. Now as you can see, it also has the database name. So database name, you can change it as a meaningful database name. It just allows you to have something like this. Later when you open SQL Server, this database name will make more sense. Now when I come down here, it allows you to select your different service applications. Now these are various functionalities provided by SharePoint to your web application. So you can go ahead with selective options as well by choosing custom, and then or you can just go with the default set of connections, which is actually having all the functionalities associated with your web application. The last thing is allowing you to give feedback. Obviously it has no, and then I'm going to click on OK. Now web application creation usually takes a couple of minutes, because it has to create the IIS website as well as put in your SharePoint files there and configure in your config database as well. So let's just wait for it, and then we'll come back in the next lesson and look at how do you create site collections. Thank you.